You might picture ancient Egypt as a land of towering monuments, pyramids rising from golden sands, temples carved with intricate hieroglyphs, and grand processions marching beneath the desert sun. But the truth of Egypt, the everyday Egypt in which millions lived and died, was built not from monumental stone, but from something far humbler: mud brick. And behind every one of those bricks was a worker whose days were long, repetitive, and coated with the silent heaviness of clay. Imagine yourself stepping into that worker's world. You stand barefoot on the edge of the Nile floodplain, the river's waters receding after the inundation. Before you stretches a stretch of wet earth, thick, sticky, and shining slightly under the rising sun. It is this earth that will define your entire working day, and perhaps your entire life. Mud brick makers were essential. Egypt's houses, storehouses, walls, enclosures, and many administrative buildings were constructed almost entirely of mud brick. Stone was expensive and reserved for temples or tombs. Stone was eternity, but mud was for life. And life required building, patching, and constant rebuilding as the years and the weather softened the very walls that sheltered Egypt's people. Your work begins by collecting river mud, the kind left behind after the Nile floods. This mud is rich in silt, fine and smooth, perfect for shaping. But it is also heavy, so heavy that your back aches just looking at it. You scoop the wet mass with a wooden shovel, or sometimes with your hands, dropping it into large pits. The mud must be mixed with chopped straw, which acts as a binding agent. The straw prevents the bricks from cracking as they dry under the harsh Egyptian sun. This mixing process is not done from the comfortable distance of a tool's length. No brickmakers step into the pit itself, squishing the mud between their toes, using their legs like stirring paddles. You would feel the mud pulling against your skin, a weight that seems alive, clinging to your ankles and making each movement just slightly more difficult than the one before. The straw scratches your feet, catches against your toes, and sticks to your skin. Even the air is heavy with the scent of wet earth and fermenting stalks. The mixing pit is neither glamorous nor clean. It is repetitive, slow, and entirely necessary. Once the mud reaches the correct consistency, smooth but firm, thick but pliable, you scoop it into rectangular wooden molds. These molds determine the size and shape of every brick. The process is precise. Too little mud and the brick will be weak. Too much and it will warp, making it difficult to stack. You lift the mold, filled with heavy mud, place it onto the ground, and smooth the top with a wet hand or a flat piece of wood. Then you lift the mold up again, leaving behind a clean, sharp-edged brick. This action repeats hundreds of times a day, in the heat, in the dust, under the open sun. Egyptian mud brick makers often worked in teams, not because the labor was specialized, though it required skill, but because it was simply too exhausting to do alone. Some would mix the mud, some would carry the straw, some would mold the bricks, and others would carry the freshly molded bricks to drying areas. The bricks were laid out in rows, each row stretching like a long, sun-baked path toward the horizon. For the next several days, the bricks would dry, the sun turning them from dark brown to a pale, sandy color. As they dried, they needed to be turned, inspected, and sometimes repaired. The environment around you would feel oddly quiet during this stage. The sun beats down, as though it were a weight resting on your shoulders. Flies gather around the wet bricks. Workers walk slowly, their movements deliberate, partly to conserve energy, partly because the repetitive, rhythmic nature of the work lulls the mind into a kind of muted focus. Boring work can do that to you. It forces you inward. As you move through this scene, you might notice something else: the presence of officials. In larger construction projects, temple complexes, palace buildings, or government storehouses, scribes often stood nearby, recording every batch. They counted bricks, noted defects, and supervised the quotas workers needed to fulfill. Egyptian bureaucracy was thorough, even at the level of mud brick production. You might feel their eyes on you as you work, a constant reminder that even in a simple trade, the state hovered nearby. But not all mud brick makers worked for the government. Many were villagers producing bricks for their own homes or for their neighbors. In small communities along the Nile, everyone knew how to make bricks. It was a survival skill, as essential as farming or fishing. The Nile's floodplains ensured that brick-making materials were always available, and so the craft became interwoven with domestic life. If your roof collapsed, you knew you could make new bricks. If your neighbor's courtyard wall eroded after an unusually humid season, the community could rebuild it within days. Still, even in these quieter settings, the work did not become easier. The sheer physicality of the job remained constant. Your hands would feel dry and cracked by midday, even though they were constantly coated in mud. Your shoulders would ache from lifting the molds again and again. The soles of your feet would toughen over time, but never enough to forget the sensation of rough straw and gritty soil beneath them. The boredom itself would become a kind of companion. You would learn to measure your day not by dramatic events, but by subtle changes in heat and shadow. The coolness of morning, the slow rise of the sun, the heavy quiet of midday, and the long fading light that finally signaled rest. Ancient Egyptian laborers often began before sunrise to avoid the hottest part of the day, but even so, you would feel the hours stretch like long strips of papyrus, each one nearly identical to the last. Yet within this mundanity lies a fascinating truth. Mud brick makers shaped the very texture of Egyptian civilization. Their work built the homes where families gathered, the granaries that stored harvests, the workshops where craftsmen carved statues or forged tools. Without these bricks, the Egypt you imagine, the bustling towns, the administrative centers, the protective walls would not have existed. If you were to walk through an ancient Egyptian village, most of the buildings would be modest and uniform, constructed from the same bricks you made with your hands. Their walls would be thick, helping to keep interiors cool. Roofs would be flat, supported by wooden beams and more layers of mud brick plaster. Homes would require constant maintenance. Each year, small cracks would form, walls would erode just slightly, and repairs would be needed. This cycle meant that the brickmaker's work never truly ended. If anything, the job increased as the years passed. Even temples and monumental structures, though made of stone, often began with mud brick foundations or temporary construction ramps built by brickmakers. Those massive ramps you see in archaeological diagrams, the ones that lifted stones into place, were built from the same muddy mixture you mixed with your feet. They were colossal piles of compacted earth, constantly reinforced, constantly extended. When the temple was completed, those ramps were dismantled, their bricks scattered, reused, or left to erode naturally. So, although the job was physically demanding and undeniably monotonous, it was also foundational. Brickmakers were unseen architects of Egyptian daily life. Their work surrounded people every day, from the cradle to the grave. Literally, in many cases, because even tomb walls for commoners were made of mud brick. You might wonder about the workers themselves. Ancient Egypt's social structure was layered and complex, but mud brick makers were typically free laborers, not slaves. Some were seasonal workers, farmers who made bricks during the Nile flood season, when fields were underwater and agriculture paused. Others were permanent laborers, employed by estate owners, temples, or royal officials. Payment was usually in kind: grain, bread, beer, or clothing, rather than money. These goods sustained families and reinforced the social fabric of labor and obligation. In your mind, imagine the end of a brickmaking day. The sun hangs low, casting long shadows across the rows of drying bricks. The air finally cools just enough for you to breathe comfortably. You wash your hands in a small clay pot of water, watching the mud slide away, leaving faint stains on your skin. Nearby, other workers sit in small groups, drinking simple beer and sharing bread. Conversations are quiet, often about the next day's work or small events from the village. Even in these moments of rest, the rhythm of life feels slow, methodical, and unhurried. As you look over your day's work, dozens, perhaps hundreds, of bricks laid out like sleeping tiles on the earth. You feel a small but steady sense of completion. These bricks will stand long after the fatigue of the day has faded. They will become walls, roofs, foundations. They will protect families you may never meet. They will be part of something larger than the monotony that shaped them. And yet, as you consider the next morning's work, the mixing, the molding, the lifting, you may find yourself wondering something quietly, something that many workers throughout history may have felt as they labored in obscurity. As dawn returns to the Nile floodplain, you rise again to the same patch of earth that has shaped your last several days. Yesterday's work still lingers in your muscles, the dull ache in your shoulders, the stiffness in your lower back, the soreness in your calves and feet. Yet today, there is a subtle difference. The sun is rising over a slightly altered landscape. Some bricks from yesterday have dried enough to be moved. Some have cracked or shrunk, requiring repair. The endless cycle of creation, inspection, and adjustment continues, and you, the mud brick maker, remain at the center of it. In Section 1, we considered the labor of molding and drying bricks, the physicality, the repetitive rhythm, but the job involves far more than brute force. Mud brick making is also a subtle science, one governed by the soil, the weather, and the ever-changing behavior of water in the Nile's silt. Understanding the mud is crucial. Too much sand, and the brick will crumble when dry. Too much water, and the brick will collapse under its own weight. The proper ratio of straw, earth, and moisture is learned only through long experience, often passed down in families or small villages. A worker develops a sense for the mud, how it should feel when pressed between fingers, how it should bend without breaking, how long it will take to dry under the sun's heat. In the early days of apprenticeship, you likely learned through failure. Bricks might warp, collapse, or crack unexpectedly. Some might dry unevenly, curling at the edges like tiny, sun-baked boats. Others might attract swarms of insects, or mildew might appear if humidity was high enough. Each mistake is both discouraging and educational. Over time, your hands develop a memory for the correct mixture. Your feet learn to sense the perfect consistency in the pit. Your eyes scan the rows of drying bricks for subtle imperfections that will tell you which batch must be corrected or discarded. Despite the technical skill involved, the work remains unforgivingly physical. A full mold of mud brick weighs between 10 and 15 kilograms. To fill hundreds of molds each day is to lift, carry, and place tons of wet earth with your hands and your back. The clay is sticky, clinging to your skin and making every motion slightly heavier than it should be. Long hours bend your posture into a slight stoop, and by midday, your muscles thrum with fatigue. Some workers develop calluses so thick that the mud barely touches their skin anymore. Others blister or crack, leaving raw, sensitive patches that sting whenever they make contact with straw or coarse soil. Seasonal cycles further shape the labor. The Nile floods dictate much of Egyptian life. When waters rise, farmers leave their fields, unable to sow or harvest. Brickmaking becomes one of the primary forms of labor during these months. It is often organized communally or overseen by local officials, and workers are typically compensated with food, clothing, or small payments in grain. The work is necessary for the survival of communities. Mud brick walls protect homes, granaries, and workshops from wind, rain, and the occasional flash flood. They form the infrastructure of daily life, ensuring that families have roofs over their heads and storage for their harvests. Occasionally, larger projects place you in contact with more organized labor forces. The state might commission brickmaking for a new administrative building or a temple. In such cases, scribes record your output, noting the number of bricks molded and dried. They are meticulous, sometimes writing in hieroglyphs that praise efficiency or mark errors. Their presence introduces an element of surveillance. You sense the weight of their gaze as you work. The bricks become more than just objects of utility. They are units of labor, measured against bureaucratic expectations. Among these official projects, the work often becomes more regimented. Bricks must meet specific dimensions. Some are intended for decorative facades. Others form the rough, load-bearing walls. Variations in composition may reflect the purpose. A stronger mixture for structural walls, a lighter one for partitions or enclosures. As a worker, you may not have the freedom to experiment. Following instruction precisely ensures that the walls will not crumble when houses or temples are built. Mud brick production also exposes you to a surprising array of environmental hazards. Dust and silt infiltrate the lungs, especially when dry bricks are being moved or stacked. Sun exposure is relentless, particularly in the summer months. Protective clothing is minimal, often limited to a simple linen kilt. Dehydration is a constant concern. Some workers develop chronic back pain or joint issues from years of bending, lifting, and carrying. Still, few of these dangers are fatal, at least compared with the perils faced by laborers on quarries or pyramids. And yet, despite the harshness, there are rhythms and small comforts. Working alongside others fosters a muted camaraderie. Stories are shared, sometimes quietly, over the beat of lifting and placing bricks. Apprentices learn from elders not only how to shape and dry mud, but also how to navigate the social dynamics of work. Who can be trusted to share the load? Who speaks too much? Who complains excessively? These informal networks are as critical as skill in mud brick making. Your tools, or lack thereof, also shape your day. A simple wooden mold, a shovel, a basket for straw. These are often all you need. Unlike masons or stonecutters, you rarely require chisels or hammers. The work is almost entirely tactile. Your body becomes the primary instrument. You gauge the moisture of the mud by feel, the pliability by pressure, the amount of straw by the way it tears when pinched. There is no room for shortcuts. A poorly made brick compromises not only the structure it will form, but also your reputation among supervisors and peers. Once bricks dry sufficiently, they must be transported to their final destination. Moving them requires coordination and endurance. You and your fellow workers lift bricks, carry them in bundles on the head or in baskets, and stack them carefully to avoid cracking. In large projects, temporary scaffolding, or ramps, is built to move bricks higher or farther. The work is physically taxing and requires constant vigilance. A dropped brick might be worthless. A cracked brick might cause structural weakness later. Each brick carries with it both the labor of your body and the potential consequences of error. The social aspect of the work is subtle but constant. Mud brick makers are rarely celebrated in Egyptian texts, unlike scribes, priests, or pharaohs. Their contributions are invisible, yet they are part of a larger social machine that sustains Egyptian civilization. Without bricks, houses would collapse, granaries would fail, and everyday life would falter. There is a quiet dignity in this anonymity. You know that your labor supports entire communities, yet recognition is rare. The reward is survival, the pride of work done correctly, and the small, repeated satisfaction of seeing rows of neatly dried bricks stretch across the floodplain. And here lies an interesting paradox. While mud brick making may seem monotonous or insignificant, it is the lifeblood of society. The very walls that shelter families, the partitions that organize towns, the enclosures that store food, these are all products of repetitive labor performed by hands like yours. Each brick is a testament to human endurance, a record of countless days shaped by heat, weight, and repetition. In a way, mud brick makers leave a subtle imprint on history, not in monuments or inscriptions, but in the structures that allow life to continue. By the end of the day, as you walk back along the drying fields, the sun sinking low in the sky, the bricks cast long shadows across the ground. You feel the weight of fatigue settle into your muscles, but also a quiet satisfaction. Each brick is slightly different, yet together they form a uniform pattern. A foundation, not just for buildings, but for continuity, for civilization itself. Yet, as the horizon darkens and the coolness of evening takes hold, you cannot help but wonder about the future of these humble walls. How long will they last? How many hands, known or unknown, will continue this work after you are gone? And beyond that, you might ponder something more personal, something that has perhaps always lingered at the back of a brick maker's mind. If your labor is essential to the very fabric of society, yet you yourself are invisible within it, what does it mean to leave a legacy at all? The answer is not immediately clear, and it lingers as you prepare to return the next morning, to the riverbank, to the mud, to the straw, to the endless shaping of clay that forms the backbone of an empire. Morning arrives once again, pale and quiet along the Nile floodplain. The repetitive rhythm of mud brick making has become almost meditative. Your body knows the motions, almost automatically. Scoop, mix, mold, lift, smooth, place. But today is different. Today, the batch you are producing is intended not for a small village home or a granary, but for the foundation of a new administrative building, part of a project commissioned by local officials in service of the pharaoh. The weight of purpose presses slightly heavier than the physical weight of mud itself. In the grand scheme of history, you are not a scribe, a general, or a pharaoh. You are, ostensibly, invisible. Yet without workers like you, there would be no buildings, no granaries, no workshops, no homes. Civilization itself would crumble, brick by brick, if the labor that supports it ceased to exist. And here, in the early morning light, the enormity of that fact seems almost tangible as you step into the pit once more. The process begins as always. River mud is scooped and mixed with straw, the two components blended until they form a pliable mass. Your hands and feet knead it, testing consistency and texture. In these early hours, the air is cooler and the mud clings less aggressively to your skin. There is a faint comfort in these moments, a brief respite before the sun climbs and the work becomes punishing once more. Yet comfort is fleeting. Each day demands patience, endurance, and careful attention. With a practiced motion, you fill the wooden molds and gently lift them away, leaving neat rows of freshly shaped bricks. You note the subtle variations in the drying earth. Some bricks will crack in the afternoon sun, others may hold perfectly. It is part of the job to anticipate and correct these imperfections. When a brick is imperfect, you either reshape it immediately or set it aside for later reuse. The quality control of mud brick making is relentless. No one admires the finished product in the way they might a carved statue or a painted fresco. Yet its integrity is critical. Moving the bricks to the drying area requires coordination, sometimes with other workers. They are laid carefully, side by side, leaving small gaps for air circulation. The sun will gradually harden the bricks, turning them from dark, wet mud to pale, solid rectangles. This is a slow transformation, one that cannot be rushed. Any attempt to accelerate the drying by stacking too closely, by leaving bricks exposed to sudden heat, or by neglecting minor cracks, risks disaster. A poorly dried brick may collapse under the weight of the walls it is meant to support. In a sense, the patience of a mud brick maker ensures the survival of everyone who will live behind these walls. Despite the repetitive nature of the labor, there is a subtle artistry in the work. You learn to recognize variations in the mud that others might overlook. Slight differences in clay density, straw thickness, or moisture content affect the brick's behavior. Over the years, this sensitivity becomes second nature. You begin to feel a quiet pride in your craftsmanship, even if no one outside your small circle of fellow workers notices. It is an uncelebrated skill, but it is skill nonetheless. As the day progresses, the sun climbs higher, turning the floodplain into a shimmering expanse of heat and light. Sweat drips down your face, mixing with mud on your hands and arms. The constant repetition of lifting, pressing, and placing bricks leaves your muscles throbbing. Yet in this physical strain lies a rhythm that many workers come to appreciate. Each motion is part of a larger sequence, each brick part of a larger pattern. There is a strange satisfaction in seeing rows of perfectly aligned bricks stretching across the earth, a silent testament to hours of labor. Even the moments of rest are measured. Workers sit together, sharing bread, small amounts of beer, and brief conversation. There are no tales of glory here, no mention of kings or monumental achievements. Conversations revolve around survival, family, and the small happenings of the village. The work itself dominates thought, but within it, there is also a social life, a web of relationships, mentorships, and unspoken hierarchies that govern who leads, who assists, and who learns. Throughout the day, the supervisory scribes occasionally check on the progress. Their presence is subtle but persistent. They count bricks, inspect dimensions, and ensure adherence to quality standards. Though they wield no physical power over you, their gaze reinforces a social pressure. Work diligently, or the batch may be rejected, and your reputation diminished. The oversight of scribes is an early form of bureaucratic accountability, ensuring that even uncelebrated labor contributes to the wider goals of society. One of the enduring aspects of mud brick work is its impermanence. Unlike stone, which endures for millennia, mud brick is vulnerable to time, weather, and neglect. Walls require regular maintenance, roofs need periodic repairs, cracks appear after years of sun and occasional rain. This impermanence may seem discouraging, yet it also ensures that the work you do today has a tangible, ongoing impact. Each day's labor directly affects the safety and comfort of families and communities. You are not building for eternity, but for survival, both your own and that of those around you. As the sun begins its descent, the drying bricks take on a muted, dusty hue. Shadows stretch across the floodplain, lengthening over rows of carefully shaped rectangles. There is a moment of reflection here. Every brick, though simple and uniform, is part of a larger human endeavor. These are the foundations of homes, the walls of granaries, the enclosures for livestock. Without them, the daily life of ancient Egypt would falter. Your labor, though unseen, supports a civilization in subtle but profound ways. The day closes with a sense of quiet accomplishment. You and your fellow workers wash off the mud from your hands and feet, gathering your tools and taking stock of the day's output. Some bricks will be rejected, some will dry unevenly, but most will hold. They will soon be part of walls that shelter families, workshops, and storerooms. Your labor, repeated endlessly, contributes to the continuity of life along the Nile. It is a small but essential part of history, and yet the work also leaves lingering questions. Mud brick making is repetitive, physically demanding, and often uncelebrated. The laborers remain largely invisible, their names unrecorded, their efforts unthanked. Despite this, their work underpins an entire society. Each day, each brick, each careful adjustment is a quiet act of resilience. The question remains, unspoken but persistent, in a world where your work sustains thousands yet leaves no lasting mark in stone or text. What is the true measure of a life well lived? You may never know. The mud brick walls you help create will endure only for decades, slowly eroding in sun and rain. Future generations will walk through houses and granaries built by hands like yours, perhaps unaware of the labor that made them possible. Yet without that work, society itself would falter. Your legacy exists, not in monuments or inscriptions, but in the ongoing life of a civilization that, day by day, survives and thrives because of the seemingly mundane but essential labor of ordinary people like you. And so, as you rest at the end of another day, your body aching yet steady, you can take a quiet pride in the fact that civilization itself is built, quite literally, on your shoulders. It is a humble legacy, invisible to many, yet fundamental to life along the Nile. Every brick you lay is a small, silent contribution to the continuity of history. Imagine stepping into the marshes of the Nile Delta. The air is thick with humidity, carrying the faint scent of mud, water, and vegetation. Water stretches in every direction, lapping gently against the banks where reeds rise like green sentinels. The delta is a labyrinth of canals, ponds, and mudflats. a place where life teems in quiet, hidden ways. Here, in this waterlogged world, you are a reed cutter, someone whose work is essential to daily life in ancient Egypt, yet whose days are long, physically demanding, and monotonous. Your day begins early, often before the sun fully rises, when the air is cooler and the marshes are quiet. You step into shallow water, wading carefully through mud that clings to your legs. Reeds grow thick here, rooted in the fertile silt deposited by the Nile. These plants are deceptively simple in appearance, yet they are vital to Egyptian life. From these reeds, mats are woven for homes, roofs are thatched, papyrus for writing is harvested, and even boats are sometimes fashioned. Without reeds, many practical and cultural necessities of Egyptian society would falter. The work of a reed cutter is repetitive, but requires skill. You cannot simply hack indiscriminately at the plants. Cutting too close to the ground risks uprooting the reeds entirely, preventing future growth. Cutting too high, and the usable stalks are too short for mats or papyrus sheets. You carry a sickle, sometimes curved, sometimes straight, designed for slicing through the fibrous stalks cleanly. Each movement is practiced and precise, repeated countless times throughout the day. You bend, cut, gather, and carry, often wading deeper into the marsh as you follow the thickest stands of reeds. Reed cutting is physically exhausting. The mud beneath your feet resists movement, sucking at your legs and slowing your pace. Waterlogged soil and hidden pockets of deeper mud can cause you to stumble, requiring careful attention and constant effort to maintain balance. Your hands, constantly gripping sickle and stalks, develop blisters and calluses. Your back aches from bending forward repeatedly. And yet, the work must continue. Communities rely on your harvest, and there is no pause for fatigue. Beyond the physical challenge, there is also the monotony. Hours pass in near silence, punctuated only by the occasional call from a fellow worker or the distant sound of water birds. The repetitive motions, the gentle sway of reeds, and the soft lapping of water against your legs can lull the mind into a meditative rhythm. Some workers use this time to think, reflect, or plan for the day ahead. Others lose themselves in the sheer repetitiveness of cutting, the patterns of stalks in your hands, and the endless green stretching across the marshes. Yet, the environment is not entirely peaceful. Mosquitoes and other insects swarm relentlessly, drawn to exposed skin and stagnant water. Small reptiles hide in the mud or reeds, sometimes startling an unwary worker. Occasional snakes or scorpions, though uncommon, present real danger. The wet, dense environment also hides the potential for infection from cuts or abrasions, particularly when hygiene is limited. Each day, you must remain vigilant, even as you perform the repetitive labor that defines your role. Reed cutters were often seasonal workers, joining the task during certain months of the year when reeds were mature and ready for harvest. Others worked more consistently, maintaining supplies for larger communities or temple complexes. Those who harvested papyrus for scribes or officials had a particularly precise job. Papyrus sheets required long, straight stalks with minimal blemishes. Selecting these required careful observation and delicate handling, as even a small defect could compromise the quality of the writing surface. The work is also social, though subtly so. Many reed cutters work in small groups or pairs, coordinating their movements to harvest efficiently without damaging surrounding plants. There is an unspoken rhythm to the group, a shared understanding of space, technique, and pace. Older workers mentor apprentices, teaching them the best ways to slice stalks, how to identify mature reeds, and how to carry bundles without crushing them. Social hierarchies exist, often subtle, based on experience, strength, and skill. One of the most fascinating aspects of reed cutting is its connection to other crafts and societal functions. Reeds are transformed into mats that insulate homes from the sun and help keep interiors dry. They are bound into bundles for roofing, providing shelter and protection for entire families. Papyrus harvested from the delta's marshes becomes the writing surface for records, letters, and religious texts, ensuring that scribes and officials can perform their duties. Reeds even play a role in transportation. Small boats, rafts, and flotation devices are crafted from bundled stalks. In this way, the seemingly mundane labor of cutting reeds resonates far beyond the marshes. Despite its essential nature, the work is often underappreciated. You toil in a wet, mosquito-ridden environment for long hours, yet your labor is largely invisible to those who benefit from it. Temple priests, scribes, and householders rely on your harvest, yet few witness the repetitive effort required to bring it in. The rewards are practical rather than celebratory. A ration of food, a bit of beer, perhaps some cloth or grain in payment. Recognition is rare, yet the survival and functioning of society depends on your skill and endurance. The delta itself shapes the labor. The Nile's flood cycle affects where and when reeds grow. Too much flooding, and the plants are submerged or washed away. Too little, and they dry out, becoming brittle and unusable. Experienced workers learn to read the marshes, anticipating where reeds will thrive, where the soil is optimal, and when the stalks are at their peak. This knowledge is passed down informally, often within families or local communities. Reed cutting is as much about understanding the land and water as it is about wielding a sickle. A day in the marsh might stretch from before sunrise until late afternoon. As the sun rises, the heat and humidity intensify, and water clings to your body like a second skin. Sweat mixes with mud, creating a thick, sticky layer that covers your legs and arms. Your back and shoulders ache from bending, your hands throb from gripping the stalks, and your legs tire from wading through thick mud. Yet, amid the discomfort, there is a rhythm, a quiet, meditative cadence to the work that can absorb the mind and provide a strange sense of fulfillment. Toward evening, the bundles of reeds are carried back to villages or storage areas. Larger bundles may require multiple workers to lift, stack, and transport. Each bundle represents hours of labor, skill, and careful observation. The work is unglamorous, yet it sustains communities. Homes are insulated, roofs are built, boats are crafted, and papyrus sheets are supplied to scribes. The reeds are woven into the fabric of society, both literally and figuratively. As the day ends, the marsh grows quiet again. Birds settle, insects fade, and the water reflects the dying light of the sun. You pause to rest, perhaps sitting on the edge of the canal or in the shallow water, watching the long green stalks ripple gently in the breeze. There is a quiet satisfaction in seeing the fruits of your labor. Neatly bundled reeds, ready for use, standing as evidence of your endurance and skill. Yet there is also a lingering thought. The labor is repetitive, exhausting, and largely invisible to the society it sustains. How much of what you produce will endure? How many people will ever consider the work involved in harvesting the reeds that make their homes and offices possible? And here, at the edge of the marsh, the question lingers. If a civilization can only function because of countless hours of unseen labor, what does that say about the hidden structures of power and survival? The reeds sway in silence, and you prepare to return the next day, knowing that the marshes will remain, the work will continue, and life quiet, repetitive, essential life will persist along the banks of the Nile. The next morning, you step once again into the marsh, wading carefully into the shallow, mud-choked waters. The reeds sway gently in the breeze, casting long shadows across the waterlogged ground. You know the routines of yesterday, yet today carries subtle differences. The season has shifted slightly. The Nile's water level is beginning to recede in some areas and rise in others, affecting where the most viable reeds can be harvested. Understanding these changes is part of the skill of a reed cutter, a knowledge cultivated only through long experience and close observation of the delta's rhythms. Unlike the labor of brickmaking, which focuses on dry land and sun-baked mud, reed cutting immerses you in water and vegetation, creating a work environment that is both physically demanding and environmentally unpredictable. Some days, the water is shallow and manageable, barely reaching your knees. On other days, hidden pools of deep silt threaten to trap your feet. The mud can be deceptive, hiding soft patches that suddenly give way under your weight. A misstep can leave you struggling, your sickle slipping from your hand as you fight to regain balance. In these moments, concentration is vital, not just to the efficiency of your work, but to your physical safety. Reed cutting is deceptively technical. While it may appear as simple as slicing stalks and bundling them, each decision has implications for the quality and utility of the harvest. Papyrus for scribes demands long, straight stalks that are relatively free of blemishes. Roof thatching requires bundles of reeds with uniform length and thickness, so they can be layered consistently. Mats must be flexible, yet durable. And sometimes, reeds are used for tools or small boats, requiring even sturdier stalks. Your selection, slicing, and bundling affect outcomes across multiple domains, making precision and attention to detail essential. Work today involves collaboration. You pair with another cutter, moving side by side along a dense patch of reeds. You communicate subtly, using gestures and shared knowledge to avoid accidentally damaging each other's harvests. Experienced workers like yourself mentor apprentices, guiding their hands and correcting their technique. The teaching is patient but firm. A miscut stalk can waste hours of effort. Observation, repetition, and gentle correction are all part of passing down knowledge in a profession without written instruction. Physical strain remains constant. Your hands are raw from gripping the stalks and wielding the sickle. Your back and legs ache from hours of bending and wading. The humidity clings to you like a second skin, and the scent of wet earth, decomposing vegetation, and standing water fills your nostrils. Mosquitoes and other insects swarm relentlessly, drawn to exposed skin and sweat. Sometimes, small snakes or hidden creatures emerge from the mud or reeds, requiring quick reflexes and careful foot placement. Yet the labor continues, both out of necessity and the quiet rhythm that you have come to accept. The social structure of reed cutting is subtle but present. Senior workers, often older and more experienced, naturally take on leadership roles, guiding the group and making decisions about which patches to harvest first. Younger or less skilled workers follow their lead, learning both technique and the tacit rules of marsh labor. Communication is minimal but effective. A nod, a glance, a shift in movement conveys direction without breaking the rhythm of work. Despite the repetition, there is a flow to the labor that binds the group together. As the day progresses, the practical importance of your work becomes more evident. Bundled reeds are prepared for transport to villages, temples, or workshops. Some bundles will be woven into mats, some will be processed into papyrus, and others will provide roofing materials for homes and granaries. Even small boats may be made from tightly bound stalks, providing a means of transport and fishing for families along the Nile. Your labor, though largely unseen and uncelebrated, sustains the practical functions of society. Without reed cutters, homes would lack insulation, scribes could not record events, and small boats could not ferry people or goods. The work also offers glimpses into environmental knowledge and adaptation. Reeds grow in specific patterns, thrive in certain soil and water conditions, and respond to the flood cycles of the Nile. Experienced cutters can anticipate where the strongest and longest stalks will grow. You understand how water levels affect accessibility, how wind or rain may influence the integrity of bundles, and how seasonal changes impact the timing of harvests. This environmental literacy is critical. A misjudged harvest can reduce yield, affect quality, or damage the ecosystem, limiting future growth. Despite its essential role, reed cutting is socially undervalued. Unlike scribes or temple priests, who receive recognition and status, your contributions remain largely invisible. Compensation is practical: food, beer, perhaps some cloth or grain. Recognition is rare, yet the impact of your labor resonates broadly. Every mat woven, every bundle of papyrus prepared, every thatched roof or small boat crafted originates from the labor you perform here in the marshes. This quiet influence underpins the everyday functioning of Egyptian society, forming an invisible infrastructure upon which civilization depends. There is also an element of risk inherent to the work. Standing or kneeling in mud for hours can lead to infections, particularly when cuts or abrasions are exposed to stagnant water. Sunburn and dehydration threaten health in hotter months, and repeated bending and lifting contribute to chronic aches and injuries. Long-term exposure shapes the body. Legs grow stronger from wading, backs toughen from constant bending, hands develop calluses and resistance. Survival and endurance are as much a part of the job as harvesting itself. The day ends much as it began. You carry the final bundles back toward the village or temple storage area, stepping carefully through mud and shallow water. The sun begins its descent, casting long reflections across the marsh. The reeds sway gently, as if acknowledging the work that has been performed among them. The water reflects the warm light, and the marsh takes on a quiet, golden hue. In this moment, there is a pause, a chance to reflect on the nature of your labor. It is repetitive, physically demanding, and largely invisible, yet essential. Civilization depends on the seemingly mundane act of harvesting reeds. Your hands shape the material world, even if your name is never recorded. Each bundle contributes to the functioning of homes, offices, temples, and transportation. Without workers like you, daily life in the Nile Delta would falter. Yet, even amid these reflections, the question of impermanence arises. Reeds decay, mats wear out, roofs leak over time, papyrus becomes brittle. Unlike the stone monuments or pyramids that endure, much of the labor you perform vanishes within months or years. The work is vital but temporary, leaving no enduring monument to mark your efforts. The physical contribution is real, but its trace is ephemeral. And so, as the day closes and the marsh quiets, another question emerges, one that has likely lingered at the edge of every reed cutter's mind. If your labor sustains the essential functions of society but leaves no lasting mark, how do you measure its value by survival, by the continuity of others' lives, or by some other, unseen measure? You leave the marsh reluctantly, water dripping from your clothes, mud clinging to your legs, the weight of both physical exertion and reflection pressing on you. You know the marsh will remain, the reeds will grow again, and the work will resume the next day, as it has for countless generations. Life along the Nile depends on it, quietly, invisibly, and persistently. The following day, you return to the marsh with a quiet determination. The work is familiar, yet the delta continues to test your endurance. Water levels fluctuate subtly. Patches of reeds have matured while others are still tender, and hidden mud traps threaten to pull you down with every step. You carry your sickle and a small basket for harvested stalks, your movements almost automatic after years of labor. Yet, in this routine, there is something profoundly human. The persistence to continue, despite exhaustion, discomfort, and the invisibility of your work. The marsh itself is a world apart from the bustling villages or the monumental structures of the Nile. Here, time moves differently. Hours stretch slowly as the reeds sway in rhythm with the wind and the water shifts around your legs. The repetitive motions of cutting, gathering, and bundling create a quiet cadence, a rhythm that you and your fellow workers follow without speaking. There is a deep intimacy with this environment, one that outsiders rarely experience. You learn the subtle signs of the water and soil, the strength of stalks, the timing of growth cycles, all knowledge that is critical to both your labor and the survival of the marsh ecosystem. Physical strain continues to dominate the day. Your back aches from bending over the dense reeds, your legs tire from wading through mud, and your hands are raw from gripping stalks and wielding the sickle. Sweat mixes with mud, forming a sticky layer that clings to your skin. Mosquitoes bite relentlessly, drawing blood and leaving welts that itch for hours. Small creatures hide in the marsh, frogs, snakes, and insects, and the threat of injury or infection is ever present. Despite this, you persist. The labor is unglamorous, yet the marsh will not wait for rest or complaint. it demands endurance. One of the subtle complexities of your work lies in the selection process. Not all reeds are created equal. Some stalks are too thin, too weak, or too damaged to be useful. Others grow crooked or split easily. For mats, roofs, and papyrus, you must select only those reeds that meet strict standards. A poorly chosen stalk can compromise the product, wasting hours of labor for you and others who will process the material later. Your eyes learn to scan for subtle imperfections, your hands can sense differences in thickness and strength, and your feet navigate uneven terrain to reach the best clusters. In this way, skill is as vital as endurance. The social aspect of work persists even here in the marsh. You coordinate silently with other cutters, ensuring bundles are harvested efficiently without damaging surrounding plants. Experienced workers mentor apprentices, correcting hand placement, guiding cutting angles, and demonstrating how to lift heavy bundles without crushing the reeds. These lessons are unspoken in text, but vital in practice. Knowledge is transferred orally and through demonstration, forming an informal lineage of expertise that spans generations. As the day wears on, the harvested reeds are bundled and carried to transport points, villages, workshops, or temple storage areas. Sometimes multiple workers lift a single bundle together, balancing the weight and navigating the mud. You can feel the strain in your shoulders, your arms, your legs, but also the quiet satisfaction of seeing the bundles safely delivered. These bundles will soon be woven into mats, processed into papyrus, or tied into roofing materials, supporting both daily life and the broader infrastructure of Egyptian society. Your labor, though largely invisible, sustains the practical and cultural foundations of civilization. There is a rhythm to survival embedded in the work. The marsh's cycles dictate your labor, from the growth of reeds to the rise and fall of water. Seasonal changes shift your focus, sometimes harvesting for papyrus, sometimes for thatching, sometimes for smaller projects like fencing or simple rafts. This connection to the environment fosters a deep understanding of the land, an awareness that is both practical and spiritual. You sense the delta's moods, when the water will recede, where the reeds will thrive, which areas will yield the longest stalks. This knowledge is accumulated slowly over time and becomes inseparable from the labor itself, yet the work is also impermanent. Reeds decay, mats wear out, roofs leak, papyrus becomes brittle. Unlike the pyramids or temples that may endure for millennia, your labor is ephemeral. Its impact is immediate but fleeting, sustaining life, day to day, season to season, yet leaving little trace in the archaeological record. This impermanence can feel discouraging, yet it also emphasizes the resilience and adaptability required to maintain society. Without constant care and repetitive effort, the marsh would fail to yield sufficient resources, and the villages that rely on it would struggle. Despite invisibility and impermanence, there is dignity in the labor. You see evidence of your work in the immediate results. Neatly bundled reeds ready for weaving, stacks prepared for transport, structures and materials in villages that shelter families and preserve daily life. Your contribution sustains not just physical survival, but the continuity of society. Families have shelter, scribes have papyrus, boats can ferry people and goods. This quiet influence, though uncelebrated, is essential to civilization. As the sun begins to lower in the sky, the marsh takes on a warm golden hue. Water reflects the light, and the reeds sway gently in the breeze. You pause to rest, watching the bundles already prepared for transport. There is a sense of quiet satisfaction in this moment, a recognition that your labor, repeated countless times, is part of something far larger than yourself. Each stalk harvested represents hours of effort, skill, and endurance. Each bundle contributes to the survival of families and the functioning of society. Yet, even as you rest, the question persists. If the fruits of your labor are largely invisible and temporary, how do you measure its value? You labor to sustain life, yet few will recognize the effort, and the physical products themselves will soon return to decay. The The measure of work seems to exist not in permanence or recognition, but in continuity, the ongoing survival of community, the smooth functioning of daily life, and the subtle maintenance of civilization itself. By evening, the day concludes as all days have in the marsh. Sweat-streaked, mud-covered, fatigued, yet quietly fulfilled. Bundles of reeds are stored or sent on their way to workshops, homes, and temples. The delta is calm, reflecting the sky, as birds settle and insects quiet. You step back from the marsh, feeling both the physical exhaustion of the day and the intellectual weight of reflection. Your labor is repetitive, invisible, and temporary, yet its impact ripples through the lives of countless others. In the stillness, you are reminded that the marsh will endure, the reeds will grow again, and the work will continue just as it has for generations. Your labor is part of a timeless rhythm, essential but unnoticed. And as you walk toward the village, you may wonder once more, if civilization depends on countless hours of unseen labor, how much of history is shaped by those whose names are never recorded, whose work is essential yet invisible? The answer remains unresolved, lingering in the hush of the delta's reeds. And yet, in this quiet persistence, there is a form of immortality, not in monuments or records, but in the ongoing, delicate balance of life along the Nile. The marsh, the reeds, and the laborers sustain one another, forming the invisible threads that hold society together. It is a silent, vital legacy, carried forward not in fame or recognition, but in survival itself. You find yourself in the outskirts of a small Egyptian village, standing in a sun-drenched yard where freshly cut reeds and palm branches are stacked in neat piles. The earth beneath your feet is dry, cracked in some places, yielding slightly under your weight, yet firm enough to support the weight of bundles. This is the workspace of a lattice weaver, an ordinary yet indispensable figure in ancient Egypt. You will spend your day creating the fences, partitions, and woven barriers that organize both homes and fields, shaping the boundaries of daily life for entire communities. At first glance, the work may seem mundane, almost trivial. How significant can it be to weave reeds or palm fronds into simple barriers? Yet, as you settle into the rhythm of your labor, it becomes clear that these fences form the invisible architecture of society. They delineate property, protect livestock, safeguard crops, and provide a sense of order in both rural villages and temple complexes. Without them, chaos might slowly creep into daily life. Goats wandering freely through grain stores, fields left unmarked, spaces undefined. In essence, lattice weaving maintains the structure of ordinary existence. Your day begins with preparation. You select suitable reeds, palm fronds, or other flexible plant materials from stacks prepared the day before. The choice of material is not arbitrary. Some reeds are strong but inflexible, suitable for upright posts that will bear weight. Others are more pliable, ideal for weaving into horizontal lattices or softer panels for partitions inside homes. Selecting the right material is a skill learned only through experience. Too rigid, and the lattice may crack or splinter during weaving. Too soft, and it may sag or fail under pressure. Once materials are chosen, you begin constructing the frame. 2 upright posts are driven into the soil, their depth and spacing carefully measured. This frame forms the backbone of the fence or partition. A poorly set frame results in a structure that leans, wobbles, or fails entirely. You use simple tools, wooden mallets, ropes, or wedges to secure the posts, relying on both tactile feedback and visual assessment. The precision of these early steps determines the success of the lattice itself. The weaving begins with a quiet, repetitive rhythm. Horizontal reeds are interlaced through vertical posts, over and under, until the lattice fills the intended space. Each pass requires attention. A missed strand or uneven spacing weakens the overall structure. Your hands move automatically, fingers curling, lifting, and adjusting reeds with practiced precision. The repetitive motion can be meditative, and yet your focus cannot waver. One slip can undo hours of careful weaving. Throughout the day, your physical endurance is tested. You bend, kneel, reach, and stretch repeatedly, lifting bundles of reeds that weigh more than they appear. The sun climbs higher, baking the soil and intensifying the warmth. Sweat drips into your eyes and down your back, and dust from the dry earth clings to your skin. Your arms and hands tire from continuous motion. Your back stiffens from bending over the frame, yet you persist. The labor is slow, measured, and unglamorous. But the result, rows of tightly woven lattice, forms a functional and enduring barrier. There is also a subtle artistry in the weaving. While functionality is the primary goal, symmetry, tension, and alignment matter. A poorly aligned fence may still serve its purpose, but it will lack stability and will appear untidy. Experienced weavers develop a sense of proportion and balance, ensuring that the lattices are both strong and visually consistent. Even in seemingly mundane work, skill distinguishes the competent from the novice. The labor is deeply connected to the cycles of rural life. Lattice fences define fields, keeping crops safe from grazing animals. They organize domestic spaces, separating living areas from work areas. In temple complexes or administrative buildings, woven partitions control the flow of movement, protect storage areas, and demarcate spaces for rituals. Each fence, each partition, is a small but vital component of society, sustaining both order and functionality in ways largely invisible to outsiders. Safety and durability are constant concerns. Reeds and palm fronds, though flexible, are not invulnerable. Wind, rain, and occasional flooding test the resilience of your lattices. A poorly woven fence may collapse, leaving livestock exposed or property unprotected. Your skill, judgment, and attention to detail determine whether the structure will endure the elements or fail. In this sense, your labor has long-term consequences, extending far beyond the immediate act of weaving. Working alongside others adds a social dimension. Lattice weaving is often a communal activity, with multiple weavers collaborating on larger structures. Coordination is subtle. Gestures, eye contact, and shared rhythm guide the placement of materials. More experienced workers instruct apprentices, demonstrating tension control, alignment, and structural integrity. Conversation is minimal, as focus on the repetitive task is essential, but a sense of shared effort and cooperation persists. Despite its importance, lattice weaving is undervalued. Few historical records mention these laborers, yet every village, field, and temple relies on their work. The labor is physically demanding, repetitive, and largely invisible to those who benefit from it. Compensation is practical. Food, beer, and occasional cloth or grain. Recognition is scarce. Yet the structures you create persist, shaping the physical and social landscape of daily life for generations. Environmental awareness is integral to your craft. Lattice materials vary in quality depending on soil, water, and seasonal growth. You learn to recognize which reeds are strong, which palm fronds are pliable, and which sections of the marsh or field yield the best materials. Understanding the source of your materials ensures that your structures are both durable and sustainable. Improper harvesting or selection can weaken fences, compromise crops, or diminish the usability of domestic partitions. By midday, the labor takes on a meditative rhythm. The repetitive weaving, the swaying of reeds in the breeze, the warmth of the sun on your back, these elements combine to create a sense of timelessness. Yet beneath this calm lies constant vigilance. Each strand must be correctly placed, tension must be evenly distributed, and alignment must remain true. The work is monotonous, yet precise, combining endurance, skill, and awareness in equal measure. As the sun begins its descent, the fences take shape. Upright posts stand firm, and woven lattices stretch between them, taut, even, and functional. Livestock will be contained, fields delineated, and domestic areas partitioned. Your labor, though repetitive and often uncelebrated, ensures the stability and organization of daily life. You step back to assess your work, noting slight imperfections, but recognizing the overall strength and utility of the structure. There is satisfaction in this, a quiet acknowledgement of skill applied and purpose achieved. Yet, even in this moment of completion, a subtle reflection arises. Lattice weaving is impermanent. Over time, reeds decay, sun bleaches the fibers, and wind loosens strands. The fences you build today will eventually collapse, requiring repair or replacement. Your labor is essential, yet ephemeral. Its impact is felt immediately, but fades gradually. This impermanence is a humbling aspect of work. You contribute to the continuity of society, yet leave no lasting monument in stone or inscription. And so, as you gather your tools, stack remaining reeds, and prepare to return to your home, a question lingers in the back of your mind. If your labor is essential to maintaining order, protecting livelihoods, and sustaining civilization itself, yet leaves no permanent record, how is the value of your work truly measured? The sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the newly woven lattices. You leave the yard with tired muscles, sticky hands, and a quiet sense of accomplishment. Tomorrow, the work will begin again. New fences, repairs to old structures, and the ceaseless, meticulous rhythm of weaving that shapes both land and society. It is labor that is at once invisible and indispensable, repetitive yet meaningful, ephemeral yet foundational. The next morning, you return to the yard where reeds and palm fronds lie neatly stacked, ready for another day of weaving. The work of the lattice weaver is cyclical, governed by both the rhythm of the day and the seasons. Unlike other laborers whose tasks may be dictated by sudden demands, harvests, floods, or building projects, your work flows in quiet repetition. Fences, partitions, and enclosures are needed consistently, maintained, repaired, and replaced as they degrade. You move through the motions with practiced hands, aware that each strand you weave today contributes directly to the organization and survival of your village. You begin with the preparation of materials. Some reeds are bundled tightly for upright posts, while others are chosen for horizontal weaving. Palm fronds are split lengthwise to increase flexibility, their fibrous texture allowing them to interlace smoothly. Attention to detail is crucial. If a post is too weak, the entire fence may collapse. If horizontal strands are too uneven, the structure will sag over time. Every decision in this early stage of work influences the durability and effectiveness of the final product. Once the frame is prepared, weaving begins in earnest. Hands move rhythmically over the vertical posts, guiding the horizontal reeds over and under, creating a tight lattice. Each pass requires precision. Spacing must be even, tension consistent. Inexperience can be disastrous. An uneven weave compromises both strength and stability. The skill lies in maintaining a consistent pattern while accommodating the natural variations in materials. Some reeds bend differently, some palm fibers fray unexpectedly, and some posts are slightly warped. The rhythm of your hands adjusts in response, a subtle dialogue between you and the natural world. Physical endurance remains a constant challenge. Bending, kneeling, and stretching over the course of hours takes a toll on your back, arms, and legs. Sun exposure intensifies fatigue, and the smell of drying reeds, mixed with dust and sweat, clings to your skin. Yet, there is also a meditative quality in repetition, over and under, your hands memorizing the weave as your mind drifts. The labor is both grounding and hypnotic, demanding attention while encouraging a quiet immersion in the moment. Working with other weavers introduces both coordination and subtle hierarchy. Experienced artisans lead by example, showing novices how to maintain tension, secure posts, and weave efficiently. Communication is largely non-verbal. Gestures, shared glances, and a tacit understanding of spacing govern the group. There is a rhythm to collaboration, a shared cadence that ensures productivity without disrupting the flow of individual labor. Over time, apprentices internalize this rhythm, learning not only technique but also patience and precision. Your work does not exist in isolation. The fences you create protect fields from wandering livestock, organize domestic spaces, and secure storage areas. Each structure is integral to daily life. Granaries shielded from goats, homes partitioned for privacy, communal areas defined and orderly. Even temples and administrative complexes rely on woven barriers to control access and protect materials. In this way, lattice weaving has a reach far beyond the yard. It shapes the experience of living, working, and worshipping within the village and surrounding settlements. Environmental awareness is woven into every decision. Reeds vary in strength and flexibility, depending on soil, moisture, and sun exposure. Palm fronds must be split and prepared to withstand tension without fraying. You learn to judge the quality of materials by texture, color, and weight. Improper selection can compromise the fence's longevity. The natural cycles of growth dictate when materials are available, requiring foresight and adaptability. Knowledge of the land is as important as technical skill in weaving. Challenges arise in unexpected ways. Occasionally, a strong wind bends newly woven fences, threatening to undo hours of labor. Rain softens the soil around posts, requiring reinforcement to maintain stability. Reeds dry too quickly under harsh sun, becoming brittle and prone to snapping. Each challenge demands attention, problem-solving, and sometimes improvisation. A lattice weaver cannot rely solely on repetition. Adaptability is essential, as is patience. Despite the work's physical demands and environmental challenges, there is a quiet pride in seeing the product emerge. A fence that stands straight, taut, and uniform is tangible evidence of skill applied correctly. Its utility is immediate and undeniable. Crops are protected, livestock contained, domestic spaces organized, yet this pride is tempered by impermanence. Reeds will deteriorate, palm fibers will fray, and fences will need repair. Your labor is essential, but temporary, like a heartbeat in the ongoing life of the village. The day progresses with the addition of finishing touches. Frayed ends are trimmed, loose strands are secured, and the structure is checked for gaps or weak points. Even small adjustments contribute to long-term stability. The repetitive, meticulous work may appear mundane, but it carries profound significance. Each fence preserves order, protects livelihoods, and shapes daily life in subtle yet essential ways. You are both creator and guardian, ensuring that your community functions smoothly. Working alongside others allows moments of quiet observation and reflection. You notice subtle patterns in the marsh grasses, in the bending of reeds, in the behavior of animals around fenced areas. The labor teaches patience and observation, offering insight into the environment that few outsiders experience. Over time, these lessons become intuitive. You know when a post is too weak, when a reed is too brittle, when tension must be adjusted to prevent sagging. Your hands and mind work in tandem, translating knowledge into physical structures. There is also the question of social invisibility. Lattice weaving is essential, yet few records mention these laborers. Priests, scribes, and officials receive recognition, but your contribution remains largely unacknowledged. Compensation is practical rather than celebratory. Food, beer, occasional cloth, or grain. Yet the work's impact is far-reaching. Every field protected, every home partitioned, every storage area secured depends on the labor of hands like yours. In this sense, invisibility does not diminish value. It simply obscures it from historical record. As the sun begins its descent, shadows lengthen across the yard. Fences are complete, standing taut and uniform, ready to protect, organize, and structure the village. Your muscles ache, your hands are calloused, and your back is stiff, but the satisfaction of functional craftsmanship lingers. There is quiet acknowledgement among fellow weavers, a shared understanding that your labor, though uncelebrated, is indispensable. Yet reflection follows close behind. Each lattice is impermanent. Reeds decay, palm fibers fray, posts weaken. Your labor, though essential today, will require repetition in the future. The cycle is endless. Construct, maintain, repair, repeat. Civilization depends on such repetition, yet the workers themselves are often absent from the historical narrative. You wonder, how much of society is built and maintained by hands that leave no trace beyond function? And so, as the day ends and you gather remaining materials, the question lingers. If your work maintains the stability of daily life, yet leaves no permanent record, how does society measure the worth of those whose labor is invisible but indispensable? With the sun dipping below the horizon, you leave the yard, your tools slung over your shoulder, mud and sweat clinging to your skin. The fences will endure for a time, protecting crops, containing animals, and organizing space. Tomorrow, repairs and new lattices will be needed. And yet, the quiet continuity of your labor ensures the village's survival, the smooth operation of society, and the subtle preservation of order in an ever-changing world. The morning light stretches across the village, illuminating the earth-stained yards where reeds and palm fronds lie in neat stacks, ready for the day's labor. You return once again to the worksite, aware that each lattice you weave contributes to the quiet structure of daily life. The tasks are familiar: selecting materials, preparing frames, weaving horizontal strands, and checking tension. Yet today, the sun feels slightly hotter, the air drier, and the weight of your responsibilities seems to press just a bit heavier on your shoulders. For every strand woven, there is a small yet critical impact on the lives of those who will inhabit the spaces your fences define. The morning begins with preparation, selecting reeds and palm fronds with care. You examine each stalk for strength, flexibility, and durability, aware that even a slight imperfection could compromise the lattice. The vertical posts are placed with precision, carefully driven into the soil to ensure stability. Misjudgment at this stage can have consequences. A leaning fence or a wobbly post will not protect crops, livestock, or domestic spaces as intended. Every detail, no matter how small, carries significance. As the weaving begins, the repetitive motion settles in like an old rhythm. Horizontal reeds slide over and under vertical posts, fingers curling and adjusting with practiced ease. There is a quiet focus, an absorption in task, a dance of hands and materials that repeats endlessly. The physical effort is substantial. Bending, kneeling, lifting bundles, and pulling reeds into place. The sun rises higher, warming your back and arms, and the smell of drying reeds mingles with dust from the soil. The work is exhausting, yet the rhythm provides a sense of control and mastery. Working alongside other weavers, you note the subtle social structures that govern collaboration. Experienced artisans guide novices, demonstrating techniques for tension control, post alignment, and weaving efficiency. Communication is often non-verbal. Gestures, nods, and shared glances convey instruction and coordination. There is a silent camaraderie among workers, a shared understanding of the labor's purpose and the skill it demands. Apprentices gradually internalize these lessons, their movements becoming more confident, their touch more precise. The utility of the lattices is evident in every detail of daily life. Fences protect fields from wandering animals, partitions organize domestic spaces, and storage areas remain secure from inadvertent interference. In temple complexes or administrative compounds, woven barriers control movement and safeguard resources. Your labor, though largely unseen, sustains the physical and social order of the village. Without the fences you create, chaos could easily disrupt daily routines, compromise food security, or create tension between households. In this sense, the lattice is more than a structure. It is an invisible scaffold upon which life depends. Environmental awareness remains a constant guide. Reeds vary according to soil moisture, sun exposure, and seasonal growth. Palm fronds differ in flexibility and strength depending on their age and the conditions in which they grew. Improper selection can compromise the lattice, leading to sagging or structural failure. The laborer must read the environment, judge the quality of materials, anticipate how they will react to tension, and adjust weaving technique accordingly. In this way, technical skill is inseparable from ecological literacy. Challenges persist throughout the day. Sun, wind, and heat test both endurance and skill. Occasionally, a post may shift in the soil, requiring immediate reinforcement. Reeds may dry too quickly, cracking under tension, or fronds may split unexpectedly. These minor difficulties demand vigilance, problem-solving, and a subtle improvisation to maintain the lattice's integrity. Each adjustment, small though it may seem, ensures the fence serves its purpose for as long as possible. Despite the repetitiveness and invisibility of your labor, there is quiet satisfaction in watching the lattice take shape. Straight posts support taut, uniform weaving, creating a structure that is both functional and aesthetically ordered. The fence will protect crops, guide livestock, and organize domestic spaces. Each strand contributes to a broader pattern of daily life. The work is repetitive and physically taxing, yet it holds meaning because it ensures continuity, stability, and safety for your community. As the sun begins its descent, the day's labor draws toward completion. You step back to survey your work. Fences aligned, lattices taut, gaps minimized. There is pride in the precision and utility of your creation. Yet with pride comes reflection. The lattice, though essential, is impermanent. Reeds will degrade, palm fibers will fray, and posts will loosen over time. The work you perform today will require repetition tomorrow, next week, and next season. It is a labor of endurance, not of immortality, a contribution essential to survival, yet ephemeral in nature. Social invisibility weighs subtly on your mind. Historians may never record your name, yet civilization depends on labor like yours. Priests, scribes, and officials leave monuments and written records. You leave only functioning fences. Your work is acknowledged quietly, practically, and sometimes not at all. Yet without it, the village's order and efficiency would falter. Your hands, calloused and skilled, sustain lives through a rhythm that remains largely unseen. As evening settles, the village quiets. Livestock are enclosed, fields demarcated, and domestic spaces organized. The lattice stands as a silent testament to repetitive effort, technical skill, and environmental awareness. Its utility is immediate, even if its creators remain invisible. You leave the yard, shoulders heavy with fatigue, but heart quiet with satisfaction. Tomorrow, new repairs and fences will demand your attention, continuing the cycle that keeps the village functioning. And still, as you step away, a final question lingers, subtle and persistent. If civilization is maintained by countless hours of unseen, repetitive labor, what is the true measure of those whose work is essential, yet invisible, ephemeral, yet foundational? The sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the newly woven fences. The wind rustles the reeds gently, as if acknowledging the effort that shaped them. Your labor, though temporary and largely uncelebrated, has ensured the continuity of daily life. It is a quiet, invisible legacy, one that allows civilization to function, day by day, fence by fence, reed by reed. You rest, knowing that the lattice will endure for months, carrying both protection and order, until it too will require renewal. In the fading light, there is a subtle comfort. Though your name may never be inscribed on monuments, though your contribution may be overlooked by history, your work persists in the lives it supports. Civilization is built not only on grand achievements, but also on quiet, repetitive labor, the invisible scaffolding that allows daily life to continue. In this, there is dignity, persistence, and an enduring, if unrecorded, influence on the world. The night settles over the village. Reeds sway softly, posts stand firm, and the fences, though simple, silently shape the rhythm of human life. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again, and the work of the lattice weaver will continue unseen, essential and quietly enduring, a testament to the invisible hands that maintain civilization. The sun rises slowly over the golden plains along the Nile, casting long shadows across fields dotted with grain ready for harvest. The air is heavy with the scent of ripening barley and emmer wheat, mingled with the earthy aroma of tilled soil. You stand at the edge of the field, a grain thresher, ready to begin another day of labor that is repetitive, exhausting, and yet utterly essential to the survival of your village and the sustenance of the civilization around you. Threshing is the labor-intensive process that separates edible grain from the chaff, the dry husks surrounding kernels that, if left unprocessed, are inedible. It is not glamorous work. No one celebrates the sweat and calluses that form on hands and backs. Yet without threshers, bread would be scarce, beer could not be brewed, and the food supply that sustains the Nile Valley's dense population would falter. You, like countless others, are part of the invisible engine that keeps the society functioning. Your day begins before the sun climbs fully into the sky. The temperature is cooler then, though still humid, and the labor that awaits is physical and relentless. You start by gathering bundles of grain stalks that have been cut the day before, often by reapers who move faster and lighter across the field. The contrast between cutting and threshing is striking. Reapers may walk quickly, sickles flashing in the sunlight, while threshers remain mostly in one area, moving rhythmically but slowly, their labor concentrated and exhaustive. Thresher tools vary depending on the size of the operation and the wealth of the landowner. Sometimes, simple flails, 2 wooden sticks, connected by a short rope, are used to beat the grain against a hard surface. In other places, animals, often oxen, are driven in circles to trample the grain, loosening the kernels from the chaff. Both methods are physically demanding and require careful attention. One misstep, too vigorous a swing, or a misdirected animal could destroy some of the harvest, undoing hours of work. You grasp the flail, its wooden handle rough in your hands, and begin the repetitive motion that will dominate your day. Over and over, you swing the heavy stick against the stalks, striking with measured force. The sound of grain hitting the threshing floor dry, hollow, rhythmic echoes faintly across the field. Each strike loosens more kernels, separating them from their husks. Your body bends and straightens in continuous motion, muscles aching, sweat dripping down your back. Blisters form on your hands, but you continue. The work is not for glory, it is for survival, both yours and that of the community you serve. The field is alive with movement. Other threshers, scattered across the flat expanse, labor in similar rhythms. Their bodies bend, rise, and swing in coordinated chaos, creating a steady background of motion and sound. Some work alone, focusing on a small section of grain, while others collaborate, dividing tasks and communicating through gestures, shouts, or the subtle movement of tools. The social structure is minimal but present. Experienced laborers guide apprentices, showing them how to angle the flail correctly, how to strike without damaging kernels, how to pace themselves to endure hours of repetitive motion. Threshing is not merely physical. It requires constant attention and judgment. The grain must be processed at the right stage of dryness. Too wet, and it will mold during storage. Too dry, and kernels can shatter, reducing yield. The force of each swing must be balanced carefully. Too soft, and the chaff remains intact. Too hard, and the grain itself is lost. Experience teaches these nuances, and even small miscalculations can reduce the efficiency of the harvest. Knowledge, skill, and physical stamina intertwine in this daily toil. The environment adds another layer of challenge. The sun climbs higher, baking the earth and drying the grain further, making it brittle and difficult to handle. Dust rises with each swing, coating skin, hair, and clothing. Wind, if it blows, scatters the chaff, forcing laborers to chase it, sweep it back, and continue. Despite these hardships, the rhythm of work provides a strange comfort. Over and over, swing and lift, bend and strike. Repeat, repeat, repeat. It is hypnotic, meditative, and exhausting in equal measure. Threshing is also deeply seasonal. The work peaks after the harvest, typically during late spring or early summer, when wheat and barley are ready to be processed. You may spend weeks in this routine, every day dominated by the same motion, the same sights, the same sound of grain hitting the floor. It is unglamorous, monotonous labor, yet the result is essential. Without properly threshed grain, the village could face shortages, and the broader economy of ancient Egypt, which relies on stored grain to pay workers, feed armies, and supply temples, could falter. The labor is not without danger. Repeated use of flails or other heavy tools strains the muscles and joints, causing chronic pain over time. Dust inhalation can irritate lungs, and sun exposure increases the risk of heat exhaustion or burns. Animals used in trampling operations can be unpredictable, potentially injuring workers if spooked. Mud or uneven ground near the fields can cause slips or falls. Each day, endurance, skill, and caution are required to complete the work safely. Despite its invisibility, threshing connects you to a larger social and economic system. The grain you process will feed families, stock temple granaries, and supply workers who maintain infrastructure across the kingdom. Beer, an essential daily beverage for many Egyptians, depends on your labor. The bread that sustains laborers building pyramids, scribes recording events, and priests conducting rituals originates in fields like these, processed through hands like yours. Your work is a linchpin in the chain of civilization, though largely uncelebrated. Lunch is a brief, practical affair: flatbread, some dried fish or beans, and water from the nearby canal. You sit momentarily, resting aching muscles, feeling the sun on your back and the dust coating your skin. Other threshers take similar breaks, their conversations minimal, focused more on pacing and shared endurance than idle talk. These moments of respite are necessary but short-lived. The day's work stretches on, unrelenting, until the sun begins to descend. By afternoon, fatigue sets in more deeply. Muscles ache, sweat runs into your eyes, and the sound of grain striking the floor blends into a monotonous drone. Yet, the work continues. Each swing of the flail, each careful movement of grain, is a small step toward feeding a village, sustaining families, and supporting the broader society. The labor is invisible to most, yet indispensable. Without it, bread would be scarce, beer could not be brewed, and the flow of resources across the Nile Valley would be interrupted. As the day winds down, the results of labor become tangible. Piles of separated grain lie ready for winnowing the next stage in the process that will further remove chaff and prepare the grain for storage. Your back is sore, your hands blistered, and your body coated in dust and sweat. Yet there is satisfaction in seeing tangible evidence of the day's work. The piles of golden kernels, clean and ready, representing countless hours of repetitive, essential labor. Even so, a quiet reflection lingers at the edge of your mind. This work is repetitive, exhausting, and largely invisible, yet it forms the backbone of daily life. Civilization depends not only on grand monuments, scribes, or officials, but on the unglamorous, physical labor of hands like yours. Bread and beer are consumed without thought of the people who process the grain. Temples and offices operate without acknowledgement of the workers who made the daily subsistence possible. And here, at the close of Section 1, one thought remains unresolved, quietly pressing against the edge of consciousness. Khan Khan, Khan Khan, Khan Khan. If the survival and functioning of a civilization depends on repetitive, invisible labor, how do we measure the value of those whose toil sustains life itself, yet leaves no lasting mark in history? The sun dips toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the golden fields. You pause for a moment, leaning on your flail, dust coating your skin, sweat drying in streaks along your arms. Tomorrow, the work will begin again, unchanged and unglamorous, yet utterly necessary. The rhythm of threshing continues, day after day, season after season, linking the lives of laborers to the survival of a kingdom. The sun rises once again over the flat, golden plains along the Nile, and you return to the fields, ready to resume the rhythm of threshing. Your body aches from yesterday's labor, arms stiff from swinging the flail, back sore from bending over heaps of grain, but the cycle of the harvest leaves no room for rest. In ancient Egypt, timing is everything. Grain must be processed promptly to prevent spoilage, protect food stores, and ensure that both people and livestock are fed. The pace is relentless, yet the rhythm of labor offers a strange comfort, as though your body and the task have grown accustomed to each other. Threshing is physical, repetitive, and unforgiving, yet it is also technical. You begin by inspecting the grain harvested yesterday, selecting bundles that are at the optimal level of dryness. Too moist, and kernels risk molding. Too dry, and they shatter under impact. You check the stalks, straighten bent stems, and remove any debris that might interfere with the efficiency of threshing. Each bundle is prepared with care because even a small misstep can reduce the yield, wasting hours of effort and potentially affecting the village's food supply. The work begins in earnest. You grasp the flail, muscles coiling, and swing with measured force. Each strike releases more kernels from the husks, a satisfying rhythm punctuating the otherwise still morning air. The sound, the dry crack of grain striking the threshing floor, becomes almost hypnotic, merging with the swish of wind through the field and the distant calls of other laborers. You fall into the repetition, letting muscle memory guide your movements, while your mind drifts through thought, observation, and quiet reflection. Working alongside others introduces subtle dynamics of cooperation. Some laborers work in pairs, taking turns lifting and swinging flails, resting briefly while the other continues. Others operate alone, concentrating in silent isolation. Experienced threshers instruct apprentices in technique, demonstrating how to strike efficiently without damaging kernels, how to maintain stamina, and how to pace oneself over the long, exhausting hours. These lessons are passed orally and through demonstration, forming an informal but critical system of knowledge transmission. Despite the monotony, skill and judgment are vital. The force and angle of each swing must be carefully adjusted according to the condition of the grain, the type of flail, and the moisture content of the stalks. Too weak, a strike leaves chaff intact. Too strong, and kernels are lost. Experience teaches subtle cues. The way the stalks bend, the sound of kernels hitting the threshing floor, the feel of the flail in your hands. A successful thresher must combine endurance with perception, repetition with attentiveness. Environmental conditions shape the day's labor. Heat rises as the sun climbs, baking both the earth and your exposed skin. Dust and loose chaff coat your body, clogging pores and drying lips. Occasional gusts scatter chaff across the field, forcing laborers to sweep, regroup, and continue. If oxen are employed for trampling, their unpredictable movements demand attention. A startled animal can ruin bundles or injure a worker. The work is physically demanding, mentally taxing, and ever sensitive to subtle changes in conditions. The social significance of threshing emerges in both subtle and immediate ways. The grain you separate today will feed the village, stock granaries, and supply workers engaged in temple, construction, and agricultural projects across the region. Beer, a staple for both nutrition and ritual, depends entirely on the processing of barley and emmer wheat. Families rely on bread to survive. Every swing of the flail contributes directly to this system, linking your repetitive labor to the survival and functioning of the community. The invisible labor of threshers underpins both daily life and larger societal stability. Fatigue is constant. Hours pass in relentless repetition. Swing, strike, lift, bend, repeat. Your muscles scream, Sweat drips, and your back stiffens. Even small breaks are fleeting, taken only to sip water or rest hands for a moment. The labor is monotonous, grueling, and often thankless, yet the impact is profound. Civilization depends on your endurance, your precision, and your attention to detail. Without workers like you, the food chain would falter, and society itself could face disruption. Over time, you develop a deep familiarity with the field, the grain, and the tools. You learn the subtle differences between varieties of wheat and barley, understanding which stalks respond best to flailing and which require extra care. You know which areas of the field are denser, which have harder soil, and where moisture may complicate processing. The work is not mindless. It requires ongoing observation, adaptation, and judgment, even amid the repetitive motions that dominate the day. As the afternoon advances, the piles of separated grain grow. They will next undergo winnowing, the process of using wind to remove remaining husks and debris. The fruits of your labor are tangible, though largely ephemeral. The grain will feed people for months, yet the effort you invest will be largely invisible to those consuming the final product. The labor is necessary and critical to survival, yet it leaves little permanent mark. This realization carries both satisfaction and a quiet unease. You see the immediate impact of your work, yet understand its impermanence. Grain will be eaten, brewed, stored, and replenished, forming an ongoing cycle that repeats seasonally. Labor is required continuously. For every harvest, for every village, for every community dependent on the Nile. Civilization thrives, yet the individual laborers remain unrecorded, invisible to both history and the monuments of the age. By late afternoon, the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the golden plains. Your hands are raw, your back aching, and your legs sore from standing and bending. Yet the piles of grain, now separated from husks, lie ready for winnowing. There is quiet satisfaction in the tangible outcome, a sense of accomplishment that comes from seeing a task completed correctly, despite its physical toll and the lack of recognition. And yet, a question persists, lingering in the rhythm of repeated motion. If the survival of an entire society depends on the labor of unseen hands, whose efforts are never recorded or celebrated, how do we weigh the true significance of such work? The sun sets, painting the sky in muted reds and golds. Dust rises from the field as laborers pack up. Animals are led away, and the day comes to an end. Tomorrow will demand the same endurance, repetition, and skill. The rhythm of threshing is unbroken, a constant and invisible backbone of civilization, linking sweat and effort to sustenance and survival. The field falls silent, yet the work continues in anticipation. The grain awaits processing. The village depends on your labor, and the cycle of necessity presses forward. In this quiet, unglamorous rhythm, you grasp both the weight and the dignity of unseen labor, understanding that history, survival, and civilization itself rely not only on monuments or rulers, but on repetitive, persistent, and essential toil. The morning light stretches across the Nile floodplain, illuminating fields that shimmer with golden stalks ready for harvest. You step onto the threshing floor, aware that today, like every day, your labor will be relentless, repetitive, and essential. As a grain thresher, your role is physically grueling, largely invisible, and utterly vital to the survival of your village and the broader society of ancient Egypt. The grain that passes through your hands sustains life, feeds workers, and supports temples. Yet the work itself leaves no monument, no inscription, no recognition in history. You begin by inspecting the bundles collected yesterday. Some stalks are perfectly dry and ready, others are slightly damp, risking spoilage if threshed too early. You remove weeds, straighten stalks, and separate any damaged bundles. This initial attention to detail is crucial. The slightest misjudgment can reduce yield, waste precious labor, and threaten food security. The weight of responsibility, though quiet, is ever present. Civilization depends on this careful assessment, though no one will know your name. The work begins. You lift the flail, muscles tensing, and strike each bundle with measured precision. Over and over, the sound of grain hitting the threshing floor fills the air. Dry, hollow, rhythmic. Your movements become instinctive, hands and arms moving in a practiced dance shaped by repetition and endurance. Sweat drips down your back, dust and chaff cling to your skin, and the sun climbs higher, intensifying the physical challenge. Each swing, each motion, is a small but vital act in sustaining life across the Nile Valley. The rhythm of labor is hypnotic. Swing, strike, bend, lift, repeat. The monotony is punctuated only by the occasional shout of a fellow thresher, the movement of oxen used in trampling, or the occasional gust of wind scattering chaff. There is a strange comfort in repetition. The motion, once learned, allows your mind to wander, reflecting on the day, the environment, and the invisible connections between your labor and the lives it sustains. Each strike releases kernels that will soon feed families, stock granaries, and support a civilization dependent on steady, reliable food supply. Coordination with others is subtle yet essential. Experienced laborers guide novices, demonstrating correct angles, optimal force, and pacing for endurance. Gestures, shared glances, and tacit understanding allow work to proceed efficiently without constant verbal instruction. Apprentices learn not only technique but also patience and resilience. In this way, knowledge passes quietly from one generation of laborers to the next, forming a lineage of skill that ensures civilization functions seamlessly, even though their contributions remain largely invisible. The environmental conditions shape every aspect of the work. Sun, heat, wind, and dust test both stamina and judgment. Reeds and stalks vary in dryness. Soil hardness influences how effectively you can process the grain. Oxen may stumble or veer unexpectedly, requiring rapid adjustment. Each bundle demands attention, adaptation, and careful management. Your labor is simultaneously repetitive and improvisational, blending endurance, observation, and skill into a cohesive practice that produces vital results. Throughout the day, fatigue accumulates. Blisters form on your hands, muscles ache, and joints groan with exertion. Yet the physical strain is matched by a sense of purpose. Each pile of separated grain is tangible evidence of your work's impact, a resource essential to feeding the village, supporting laborers, and maintaining temples and granaries. The labor, though physically exhausting and socially invisible, carries immediate, undeniable consequences. Without it, the cycle of survival would falter, and society itself would suffer. The significance of the work is quiet yet profound. Grain sustains life, provides materials for brewing beer, and ensures that workers, priests, and scribes can continue their roles. The rhythms of labor maintain social stability, economic function, and cultural continuity. Without threshers, bread would be scarce, beer would be unavailable, and food security would be jeopardized. Civilization, despite its grandeur in temples, pyramids, and hieroglyphs, relies on repetitive, unseen labor, performed by hands like yours. As the sun begins to descend, the day's work comes to a slow conclusion. Piles of grain, separated from husks, lie ready for winnowing and storage. The field, though still sun-baked and dusty, reflects the evidence of endurance. Golden kernels, meticulously processed, awaiting their next stage in the journey from field to table. You pause, leaning on your flail, surveying the results. There is satisfaction in seeing a task performed correctly, yet tempered by the knowledge that tomorrow, the cycle will repeat, and labor will continue with the same rhythm, repetition, and invisibility. The impermanence of the work is evident. Grain will be eaten, brewed, stored, or sold. Bundles will be replenished, and new harvests will demand fresh labor. Your efforts, while vital, leave little trace beyond immediate utility. Civilization depends on this ongoing, unglamorous labor. The rhythm continues, season after season, connecting your body and effort to the survival of countless others. even if your name is never recorded in the annals of history. Social invisibility is a constant companion. Kings, priests, and scribes leave monuments, inscriptions, and records of achievement. You, the laborer, leave only the fruits of your work: sustenance, protection against famine, and a foundation for the daily functioning of society. The contrast is stark. Monumental recognition versus quiet necessity. Yet without the latter, the former would be impossible. Civilization is built not only on legacy and records, but also on the endurance, persistence, and skill of unseen laborers like you. As evening descends, the field grows quiet. The oxen are led away. Fellow threshers depart, and the sun sinks below the horizon, leaving a golden afterglow. You stand among the piles of grain, exhausted but quietly satisfied. Every kernel is a product of patience, strength, skill, and repetition. Though history may overlook the labor, the outcome is undeniable: food security, social continuity, and the survival of countless lives. A final reflection settles in as the day closes. If civilization survives through the repetitive, invisible labor of countless hands, how much of history truly belongs to the people whose efforts sustain life itself, yet are never recorded, never celebrated, and almost entirely forgotten? The Nile plain grows still. Dust drifts across the field. The sound of distant water lapping along the riverbank carries softly, and the sun disappears beneath the horizon. The grain you process today will feed families, workers, and priests. Your labor, though invisible and repetitive, is an essential thread in the fabric of society. Civilization endures not because of grand monuments alone, but because of the quiet, tireless, and indispensable work of people like you. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again. New bundles will arrive, fresh stalks will be threshed, and the rhythm of labor will continue unseen, essential, and enduring. In the repetitive, monotonous, and often overlooked work of threshing, there is both dignity and influence. The invisible hands that feed the living, sustain culture, and silently uphold the continuity of a civilization that has persisted along the Nile for millennia. The streets of ancient Alexandria are bustling above, but you are far from the surface, descending into the narrow, damp tunnels of the city's sewer system. As a sewer worker, your world is one of shadow, moisture, and constant labor. Above, merchants hawk their goods, scribes record accounts, and citizens move along paved roads unaware of the invisible network running beneath their feet. Below, your life is defined by routine, persistence, and the careful navigation of narrow passageways that carry the city's waste. The work is far from glamorous. Water trickles and occasionally rushes through the channels, carrying human and animal refuse, mud, and detritus from every corner of the city. The smell is pervasive, a pungent mixture of organic decay, stagnant water, and the faint hint of salt from the nearby Mediterranean. Each step is calculated. The tunnels are uneven, slippery, and often dark, except for the torchlight you carry. One misstep could send you into a slick pool or a sharp-edged stone, and even minor injuries can become serious in such an environment. Your day begins before dawn. The city above is quiet, though the sewers are never still. Water flows continuously, carrying waste from households, markets, and public baths. Your first task is clearing blockages that could disrupt the flow. Sticks, rudimentary hooks, and sometimes bare hands are used to dislodge debris, break apart compacted sludge, and ensure that the city's network functions. Each blockage is unique. Some are the result of accumulated sediment, others from discarded refuse or construction debris. Problem solving is constant, and experience teaches you which tools and techniques are most effective. The labor is physical and relentless. You bend, reach, and pull with repetitive motions that strain muscles, joints, and back. Slippery floors and uneven stones demand balance and precision. Water may rise suddenly in some channels, forcing quick adjustments and careful movement. Even when the work is methodical and repetitive, danger is always present. Infection, drowning, or injury lurk as persistent threats. Your attention cannot lapse for even a moment. Sanitation is minimal. Protective clothing is rare. Your skin comes into direct contact with waste, and the risk of infection is constant. Cuts, scrapes, and minor wounds become dangerous if exposed to contaminated water. Mosquitoes, rats, and other vermin are frequent companions. Despite these hazards, the work cannot be abandoned. The sewers are essential to the health and functionality of Alexandria. Without constant maintenance, blockages would cause flooding. Stagnant water would breed disease, and the city above could descend into chaos. Your labor, though largely invisible, sustains life, commerce, and urban order. The tunnels themselves vary in size and structure. Some are narrow, barely wide enough for one person to squeeze through. Others are larger, arched with stones, designed to channel greater volumes of water. Your knowledge of the layout is critical. Knowing which channel leads where, which tunnels are prone to sediment buildup, and which are structurally weak, is essential to completing tasks safely. Navigation becomes second nature, your body memorizing twists, turns, and gradients that the eyes of casual observers could never discern. Collaboration is both subtle and critical. Sewer work is often performed in teams, with laborers coordinating to remove blockages, lift debris, and ensure safe passage through tunnels. Communication is mostly through hand signals, grunts, or brief shouts, as noise echoes unnaturally in confined spaces. Teamwork is essential. A misstep by one worker can create hazards for the others. The social dynamic is unspoken yet vital. A quiet choreography performed under difficult and often dangerous conditions. Laborers also develop techniques for long-term efficiency. Certain tools are improvised, crafted from available wood, metal, or rope. Strategic placement of wedges, hooks, and rudimentary brooms helps dislodge material more quickly. Observing patterns in water flow and sediment accumulation informs decisions about when and where to work. Experience becomes indispensable. A novice is slow, cautious, and prone to misjudgment, whereas a skilled worker moves confidently, anticipating problems before they arise. Despite the harsh conditions, the work is essential to public health. Stagnant water breeds mosquitoes carrying disease, while accumulated waste can back up into homes and streets, creating hazards for citizens. Sewer maintenance is not glamorous, yet it preserves the well-being of thousands of people, ensuring that Alexandria functions as a thriving urban center. Without this labor, the city above could suffer the consequences of flooding, contamination, and unmanageable waste. Your work is a hidden, continuous act of protection and prevention. The physical environment reinforces the intensity of the labor. Humidity is high, and ventilation is poor, leading to fatigue and discomfort. The torchlight flickers against wet stone walls, casting shifting shadows that make navigation challenging. Occasionally, narrow passages force you to crouch or crawl, muscles straining in positions that must be maintained for extended periods. Water runs cold and unexpectedly, soaking your clothing and adding weight to an already demanding physical effort. Every motion requires focus, endurance, and strength. There is also a psychological dimension to the work. The darkness, isolation, and pervasive odors can be mentally taxing. Tunnels are quiet except for the sound of water flowing, footsteps echoing, and occasional distant sounds from above. For many laborers, adapting to this environment requires mental resilience, a capacity to focus on tasks despite discomfort, and a tolerance for monotony. The work is repetitive, physically demanding, and socially invisible, but it is critical to the city's function. Your labor is largely unacknowledged. Citizens above go about daily life, unaware of the intricate network of tunnels beneath their feet, and the human effort that keeps it operational. Yet the consequences of negligence are immediate and severe. Blocked channels lead to flooding, waste spills into streets, and disease can spread rapidly. The sewer worker is a guardian of public health, a silent protector whose labor ensures safety and order. The importance of this work is immense, even if history rarely records it. As the day progresses, fatigue accumulates. Sweat mixes with water and grime. Skin is chafed, muscles ache, and backs stiffen. Yet the pile